Has it ever crossed your mind who the other is in your thinking process and how this concept of the other influences your own thoughts? Imagine, if you will, a realm where your thoughts, your curiosity, and your very nature to discriminate are all tools conceived and honed by this so-called other. This intricate dance of cognitive processes is not just a scientific study, but an artistic expression, a mix of originality and imitation. We see this struggle in the works of great artists and thinkers who dared to challenge and surpass their predecessors, forging legacies that continue to be thought of even today. But what exactly is a legacy? It's a concept tied to bloodlines, familial bonds, and according to our author, it might just be break time, the origin of thinking. Aha, but wait, there's more. Did you know that entire philosophies and metaphysical systems have been constructed to exclude this other? Yet our author argues it is the role of thinking to create and save the other. And as we delve deeper, we find that language, the very fabric of our thoughts, is a crucial mediator in this process. But what strikes right at the core is the idea that to truly comprehend anything, philosophy must first embrace non-comprehension. Now, just when you think you've got it all figured out, comes the twist. Haha, you'll hear about that soon enough. What's up, my amazing and curious folks? It's your host, Caesar, and I'm here with our in-house analyst and commentator, the brilliant Sonia. Are you all set to dive into the realm of the extraordinary? Be sure to subscribe to our Curiosity Wonderland and tap that bell icon to get notified for all our new episodes.
Hi there, everyone. I'm excited to get started. Let's unravel today's mystery, shall we?
Absolutely, Sonia. Today's topic is a mind bender. Stay tuned. Let's dive a little deeper here, folks. What really triggers our thinking process? Is it the sudden urge to sift through our memories, frantically searching for words and associations, guided by metaphors, all in the hopes of restoring our troubled minds to a state of inertia? Or perhaps it's the simple act of wondering, as suggested by Socrates. And then we have Foucault, who credits his drive to contemplate alternative ways of thinking to curiosity.
Wait a minute. You're saying our thoughts are propelled by something other than our thinking process itself?
Exactly. That's the intriguing concept we're going to explore today. We're calling this catalyst the other. Now bear with me here because this might seem a bit abstract. We're going to perform a little magic trick. We're going to transform the concept of thinking itself.
Could you give us an example to better understand this?
Of course. Picture this. Imagine you're standing in front of a mirror. The reflection you see is not you, but an image of you, the other, as we're calling it. Yet, it is this reflection that guides you in fixing your hair or adjusting your shirt. The same principle applies to thinking. Our thoughts are shaped by this other, this external influence.
So we are essentially reacting to this other. It's like the puppet master behind our thoughts.
Precisely. But here's the twist. This entire premise of thinking being guided by the other might not be what it seems at all. It's a complex spiral, a puzzle that only reveals itself when you look at it from a different perspective. It's both comforting and unsettling at the same time. Stay with us to unravel it. So let's take a step further into this realm of thought. Here's another twist to our hypothesis. What if the other, which we earlier established as the puppet master guiding our thoughts, isn't responsible for our thinking at all? What if it's the other way round? What if our thinking is actually the driving force behind the other? This would suggest that our thinking is responsible for otherness, for all others, big and small.
So now our thoughts are not only reactions, but also actions. They don't just respond to the other, but generate the other. Is this what you're getting at?
Well spotted. Now, this doesn't mean we're reverting to old philosophical ideas of Platonism, Kantian, or Hegelian idealism. It's about examining the idea that the responsibility lies with thinking itself, not the other.
But then, how do we distinguish what matters from what doesn't? What should be included or excluded in our domain of knowledge?
That's the crux. There lies a constant urge to segregate between what's relevant and what's not, to decide what should be part of our domain of knowledge and what should be cast aside. And then there's the urge to stay curious, to explore, to not limit possibilities or downplay differences, to revel in the fact that nothing is ever completely known, and to find oneself surrounded by a field of potentiality where anything and everything is possible.
So, it's a battle between wanting to understand and wanting to liberate understanding. I see the connection to our earlier discussion now.
Exactly. These two tendencies, much like our own thoughts and the other, coexist and often intermingle within us, giving rise to a mix of discriminating curiosity which seeks to grasp and yet free understanding. It's a paradox, much like the concept of tradition as explained by T.S. Eliot himself. To be part of the traditional thinkers or artists, one must challenge norms and hence be anti-traditional. We're really stirring the pot of thought here, aren't we? Now, this perpetual cycle of understanding and freeing understanding, it's not just confined to our personal thoughts. It's mirrored in our traditions as well. The concept of tradition is paradoxical. To be a part of tradition, you need to challenge norms, to break them in order to establish or preserve them. This might seem frustrating, but it gives us a new perspective on what we consider conventional.
So, it's like a constant evolution?
Indeed, evolution and revolution, both at once. Major figures like Homer, Plato, and Shakespeare revolutionized their respective domains, making the old seem obsolete in comparison. But here's the catch. To be considered great, one must appear more original than everything that came before, which includes those who themselves are considered great. That's the true puzzle.
And that brings us back to the idea of the other and its relationship with our thinking.
Yes, our tradition of thought is similar. It's often thought, but not always. Sometimes it remains to be thought, made unthinkable, or contains many possibilities which have never been developed or pursued. There are aspects of great thinkers like Plato and Kant that we could glean from, which they themselves may have never considered.
So are we saying that our thinking is both a reaction and an action, always in a state of evolution?
Precisely. And it's important to ponder a little on the notion of legacy. Who or what must always come first? Who or what is there from the beginning, leaving us a legacy? This is an intimate and personal question which philosophy has wrestled with for millennia. Things like fraternity, friendship, love, and especially paternal love all reside here. All these bonds are at the site of the most vulnerable. It's all part of the fascinating continuum of thought. These bonds, these links we've been discussing, they're tender and fragile. They need protection and are always at risk of being broken by a cruel twist of fate. Anxiety springs up when these bonds are threatened, when one fears the loss of legacy, the loss of that which is vital, that which needs to be protected at all costs.
So could we say that this fear, this anxiety, could be the origin of thinking?
Exactly. With legacy, the stakes are indeed high. We're now concerned with what really matters to us. We feel an obligation to be concerned. It's interesting how we have little say in our own legacy, but when faced with the legacy of others, we instinctively feel a responsibility to carry it on.
But what if someone refuses this obligation, denies this connection to the other?
It's a valid question. It's quite possible to ignore, refuse, or deny the other. Whole philosophies and metaphysical systems have been built to justify this exclusion. But the decision to carry on the legacy of the other is not that simple. The other tendency, that of curiosity, always lurks around.
So even though we might deny or forget the other, our curiosity eventually leads us back to them?
Correct. It's a curiosity that systematizers cannot help themselves from speculating about. The question, what causes thinking, can be asked in two ways. Either we're interested in reducing thinking to some other force, or we're intrigued about what we think for, or in whose name we think. Thinking isn't just a self-referential process. It also bears responsibility for the sake of the other, to save it from harm.
So for, in this context, has both causal and ethical implications.
Exactly. We can't separate one from the other without admitting to a fundamental split in thinking itself. It's not always just about producing a phantasmatic other. There are times when the structure of thinking itself involves reference to alterity, otherness, or difference.
Can you give us an example of this?
A classic example is Heraclitus, one of the first philosophers to name the logos or word as the origin of thinking. This brings us to the concept of linguistic philosophy, where thinking can be reduced to linguistic formulations.
Like Ludwig Wittgenstein's work?
Precisely. Wittgenstein played with the idea that thinking can be reduced to atoms that are essentially linguistic. However, he didn't just focus on this. He was also interested in exploring nonsense and irrelevant confusions.
So it's not all about reduction. There are various approaches to thinking and philosophy?
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. The variety of perspectives and approaches is what keeps the field so fascinating and ever-evolving. Wittgenstein didn't aim to reduce or simplify things. Instead, he wanted to open them up and explore the multitude of possibilities that arise from complex relationships and differences. His focus wasn't just to set language in its proper place or fix it to a set of rules. His goal was to allow thinking to go beyond just arranging propositions in an order.
So it's kind of like taking Western philosophy on a vacation, allowing it to relax a bit?
That's one way to put it. In fact, his work, Philosophical Investigations, does just that. He offers the reader puzzles, conjectures, remarks that deviate from traditional philosophical thought. His emphasis on play and the playful nature of communication, plus his focus on language itself, allowed philosophy to respect what facilitates its own operation.
Like acknowledging how language mediates things, how the object we're trying to signify is always beyond the signifier we use to name it.
Exactly. Wittgenstein believed that our perspective is key. Just like a painter creating an illusion of depth, a philosopher must learn to see differently, to think otherwise, and notice differences that lie in the margins of what we believe is central. It's about recognizing that one is always playing or being played by the game of language and thought. Philosophy is at its best when it's not exactly at the center of things. It's about shifting perspectives, becoming other than itself, and exploring the realm of non-comprehension. You know, this reminds me of a recent event where I was trying to explain a complex concept to a group of students. I got so caught up in the center of the idea, I failed to see the broader, more essential aspects that lay in the margins.
That's funny. I had a similar experience recently. I was so focused on getting my point across in a debate, I missed the opportunity to learn from the other person's perspective. I guess sometimes we all need to unground ourselves to truly feel the ground.
Indeed. And that's where Wittgenstein's conception of philosophy comes into play. According to him, the goal is not to solve problems, but to dissolve them, to make them vanish as if they never were. It's not about returning to common sense, but rather breaking the boundaries of thought and opening them up to otherness and radical difference. And that's where philosophy's beauty and complexity lie, in its ability to go beyond understanding. You see, philosophy has two unique distinctions. One between two tendencies, those who seek stable, secure knowledge, and those wanting to journey beyond understanding, and another between two types of readers, those who lean towards one tendency or the other.
That's intriguing. So the challenge for a philosopher is not just to decide which tendency to incline towards, but also to choose who they want to address.
Precisely. It's about deciding whether they want to reach out to like-minded individuals or take a risk to address those entirely different from themselves, those who possess habits that surpass all reasonable expectations. This otherness may still be on the fringes of philosophical discourse, but it continues to be addressed by those who wish to communicate in at least two tones, to appeal and respond to at least one more other.
So all philosophical writing is essentially double writing.
Yes, it needs to be read twice over, keeping two different aims in mind. Learning to maintain this tension within one's writing is the first step towards acknowledging what triggered it initially. There is a certain untamed wildness still thriving within philosophical thinking, filled with potential.
It sounds almost organic with its own natural flow.
Exactly. It's not bounded by a grid of proper paths, but rather, it springs from within the tradition itself, disrupting and supplementing it, giving it the jolt needed to set the wheels of thought in motion. And once this primordial spring is released, everything bounds beyond all known limits. The essence is to discover where your writing takes you and the unique imprint you might leave on the legacy of thinking about thinking. It's fascinating to see how the writer evolves into one of the readers of their own work. When I edit this podcast script, or even after it's published and I listen to the episode, I become one of the listeners I'm addressing. But am I only talking to myself? Not exactly.
So, you're suggesting there's an otherness in the writing, an external force that guides the process?
Precisely. Even though I must shoulder the responsibility for the contents as the author, something else crafts this. This responsibility is twofold. Primarily, it exists because others expect it from me. But it's also because I'm connected to the other who wrote it.
It's like you share a bond with the origin of your thoughts, which may span back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Right. This script, like any text, is an intermingling of other texts, regardless of whether any listener, including me, recognizes it. Words don't come with a label of origin or a certificate of authenticity. Their origin and belonging are guaranteed only by the commitment I made at the start, which, of course, can be revised in the future, even just for the fun of it. So we've journeyed through the fascinating world of philosophy, where thinking is not just a consequence of the other, but is in fact responsible for it, where tendencies to reduce and open up possibilities coexist, where legacy and responsibility intertwine, and where language mediates and decenters to recognize its grounding.
Absolutely. And in our exploration, we've seen how philosophical writing is double writing, needing to be read with two different aims in mind. We've seen how non-comprehension can hold more depth than comprehension itself, and how philosophy, in all its undomesticated wildness, continually changes and evolves.
And remember, good philosophy, much like life, is supposed to be improper. It's supposed to shed its skin and go beyond traditional boundaries, much like a snake shedding its old skin.
That's quite a punchline. Well, friends, that's it for this episode of Curiosity Wonderland. If you enjoyed our dive into the depth of philosophy and thinking, do us a favor and hit the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to share this episode with your friends.
We hope we've given you some food for thought. Until next time, keep thinking beyond the known boundaries.
Stay curious and always remember, the best thinking is yet to come. Goodbye, everyone.
I found this insightful piece titled Where Thinking Begins by Kooper Wilson on Medium, dated December 17th, 2023. If you're itching to explore more, the full URL is in the video description. Now signing off.